is 8:50. Let's talk about this. Donald Trump's fate in the hands of a jury as we head into day 2 now of deliberations.
Yeah, the verdict in this case has far-reaching implications for the country's future, which is why we brought in trial attorney Bernarda Villalona, who has been inside the courtroom during this trial. So good morning to you, and thanks for taking the time to kind of lay all of this out. So again, the jurors have the case. They've had it. They deliberated for 4 hours yesterday. Already asked for the jury instructions again, and then 2 key pieces of testimony. So what is your thinking about what's going to happen today and how long this may play out?
Well, this is what's expected. I was actually in the courtroom yesterday when the judge gave the instructions to the jury, and I was sitting in the courtroom when that loud buzzer sounded. So you got to think you're sitting in the courtroom, everyone is complete quiet, aside from some typing that you hear, and all of a sudden, like this loud alarm, which sounds like an old school phone, rings, and you hear it, and it's like, it could be a verdict or it can be a note, and that's exactly what it was, a note asking for specific testimony. And while the attorneys are going through the specific testimony to determine what to tell this jury, there's another buzzer, and that buzzer was for the jury instructions. So in New York, the jurors do not get a copy of the jury instructions. So if they want to hear the jury instructions, they have to send a note out to the judge, and the judge will then read the instructions to them. What I'm curious to see most importantly is this morning, because this morning the jury is going to indicate to the judge what part of the jury instruction do they want, because that jury instruction was 55 pages.
Yeah.
And it has a lot of information there. Do they just want the specific charges, falsifying business record? Do they want to hear what is reasonable doubt?
Yeah. Because
that will give us some insight as to at least where one of the jurors' heads are, because it can be, 1, 2, a group, or 11 to 1. You don't know. It's early.
How archaic is the New York system that you don't get a copy of the jury instructions when they're 55 pages or a readout of the testimony, right? Because they requested these key pieces of testimony from David Pecker and Michael Cohen, but they don't even get a transcript of it. It has to be read back verbally to them.
Yes. So it's crazy because depending on the jurisdiction that you're in, some jurisdictions allow you to have the jury instructions. How about this? The federal system allows you to have the jury instructions, but in New York, you can't have the jury instructions. I mean, I've been practicing here for 17 years, and as a prosecutor, I always expected the jury to send out a note asking for a readback of testimony and for the jury instructions, and also for more of an explanation, because you got to think they're not lawyers, except 2 of the jurors
I was just going to say
are lawyers. So I'm sure probably one of them were the ones that actually requested the jury instructions, but this is typical in any trial here in New York State, so it's now out of the norm.
So do you feel that will be helpful then, because there are 2 attorneys in there and with 34 counts to look over?
Yeah. So I think it's hit or miss with these 2 attorneys. They're not trial attorneys, and they're not attorneys that deal with criminal law. So dealing with the corporate sector and dealing with the civil sector is completely different than dealing with criminal law and prosecution and defense. Because in the end, this jury, what they have to weigh is really the credibility of Michael Cohen, really the credibility and the weight of the evidence that's been presented to them, to see whether they can actually find that Donald Trump is guilty of falsifying these business records. Like, did he know? Did he direct Michael Cohen to make this $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels because he knew that it was going to affect his campaign? And did he try to cover it up in the sense of how they documented it on the business records? Because the charges are the same, except with different documents, whether it's an invoice, check, or a general ledger.
Yeah. And so the prosecution laid out a very clear, lengthy closing argument telling a story. The defense really went after Michael Cohen.
Yes.
Right, in a very lengthy attack on Michael Cohen to ruin that credibility, painting him as a liar. When you look at the key pieces of what they want read back, right, the David Pecker testimony and Michael Cohen, how do you see that playing out? Is that better for the defense? Is it better for the prosecution?
Well, I think the jury notes from yesterday are definitely better for the prosecution, with the exception of we don't know what from the jury instructions they want. They can say, give me the definition of reasonable doubt, which put chaos on both sides.
Right.
But in terms of the testimony itself, it's good for the prosecution, because the defense was saying Michael Cohen is a complete liar, and then here are 10 reasons, 10 reasonable doubts here. The records, they were legit. These invoices, they weren't directed by Donald Trump. So they discounted that part. At least we know one juror probably discounted that part, because what they asked for is the testimony of Michael Cohen, so he's still in the running. They asked for the testimony of David Pecker, having to deal with this key meeting in August of 2015. What started this conspiracy about, I want you, any stories that you hear that are either good for me or bad for me, let me know, and we're going to try to limit these stories or kill these stories because we know it can affect the campaign. And I read back some of that testimony last night, and when it came to David Pecker, what they're going to hear this morning, he admitted and said that it was to benefit the campaign. Yeah. So if you're taking that as to benefit the campaign, then you have the underlying crime here that raises it to a felony of falsifying business records. So this is crucial, especially when you want to look at David Pecker. David Pecker, when he testified, is probably one of the most credible witnesses. He didn't have an axe to grind. He went into a non-prosecution agreement. He admitted his role in it. And one of the key questions that the jurors asked for is, why did he kill the deal in the sense of not get money back from Donald Trump for what he paid to Karen McDougal? And he said, kind of like, I knew what I was doing was wrong.
We would love to pick your brain because this is so fascinating, but unfortunately we've run out of time. Quick question though, what is your anticipation or expectation of how long this could last?
I don't think they'll come back with a verdict today. I think once they hear back the testimony, those 4 crucial pieces of testimony, that they're going to take a while to now start discussing it amongst each other, because you got to think yesterday was the first time that these 12 jurors got to talk about the case.
Yeah, because they weren't allowed to, right?
So I think, if anything, possibly tomorrow, but we'll get some more insight with the next 2 notes or so.
All right, Bernarda Villalona, thank you so much for coming in this morning. Keep us posted on what you're hearing from down there as well, okay?